Hello, this is Father Don Planty, pastor of St. Charles Catholic Church in Clarendon. The St. Charles site was originally developed in the 1950s and 60s to serve the needs of a much different time and place. St. Charles is now seeking to redevelop our site for its highest and best use as we seek to better serve the Clarendon community. To that end, we intend to engage a development partner for an eventual redevelopment of the site. The St. Charles Redevelopment Committee, chaired by Rashad Bader, has undertaken initial feasibility and conceptual design work to prepare for the eventual selection of a development partner. As part of these efforts, the parish has engaged David M. Schwartz Architects to conduct a conceptual design of the site and to provide recommended changes to the Clarendon sector plan as we seek to realize the site's full potential while maintaining the spirit and intent of the original sector plan. Now, Michael from David M. Schwartz Architects is going to discuss our recommended changes.
Thank you, Father Planty. The dashed line indicates St. Charles's property. It's bounded by Washington Boulevard to the north, North Corkwood Road to the west, and Fairfax Drive along the south. A small county-owned green space borders the site to the east. The reconfigured roadway along Washington Boulevard will remain 2 lanes in each direction with no on-street parking. The church's parking lot is accessed from Washington Boulevard. North Kirkwood Road has 2 lanes in each direction with a narrow median and no on-street parking. To the south, Fairfax Drive has a wide cross-section with single outer travel lanes in each direction, curbside bike lanes, and 2 rows of angle parking in the center that is used by both the church and the community. Fairfax Drive also provides access to the church's parking lot. St. Charles's existing buildings line Fairfax Drive and Kirkwood Road and reflect a more suburban approach to planning. Nearly half of the site accommodates a surface parking lot that extends along most of the Washington Boulevard frontage. There are 2 primary entrances located between the church and the parish center, the 2 buildings shaded in purple. The street entrance is located along Fairfax Drive, and a second entrance is located off of the parking lot. This plan shows the emerging concept for the redevelopment of the church's property. A new St. Charles Church, shown in dark purple, would be located at the eastern portion of the site, with the front of the church oriented toward the heart of Clarendon. Moving to the left, a new parish center, shown in lighter purple, would support ongoing church programs. It adjoins one side of the new church and takes advantage of the increasing width of the site as it extends to the west. The western half of the site, shown in tan, is reserved for the church's development partner. Located at the widest part of the site, it allows for an efficient building layout, as well as responding to the Clarendon sector plan allowance for additional height on this portion of the site. All parking is located below grade and accessed from Washington Boulevard and North Corkwood Road. A series of courtyards are interspersed between the various building elements to provide light, air, and views, as well as access to semi-private outdoor space. The plan also shows a preliminary concept of how Fairfax Drive might be redeveloped into a more pedestrian-friendly area that accommodates the needs of the community, as well as providing vehicular access to the adjoining properties. We look forward to coordinating with the county in their design of the reconfiguration of this street. We've made a number of recommendations for the update to the sector plan, but we will focus today primarily on the height and massing requirements. The diagram on the left illustrates the current sector plan's 1-to-3 taper requirement that applies to building heights greater than 75 feet located across from residential area to the north. The requirement calls for the taper angle to start at the center of Washington Boulevard, the red dashed line. Extending the taper line through the site results in a very small, inefficiently sized portion of the building, the dark upper shading, that could actually be built to a height of 90 feet. It would be highly impractical to build such a small area. Looking at that same diagram, the dashed blue line begins at the sidewalk in front of the townhouses along Washington Boulevard. It illustrates how the building heights already permitted along Washington Boulevard provide sufficient height to mask the view of the additional permitted height further into the site, making the 1-to-3 taper requirement largely unnecessary. The diagram on the right proposes an alternate method for determining the setback of taller portions of the building visible from Washington Boulevard. This is accomplished with a 65-foot setback above a height of 75 feet that will minimize the visibility of higher portions of the building from the adjacent residential community. Recommendations for updates to the sector plan provides an opportunity to incorporate a more practical building height at the center of the site. As the massing illustration on the left shows, the maximum height at the western portion of the church's property is currently 90 feet. The illustration on the right shows a recommendation to increase this to a height of 110 feet. We believe this height change is consistent with the other allowable heights in the vicinity and can be accommodated in a way that has minimal visual impact to the surrounding community. As shown on the building heights permitted on nearby blocks, a height of 110 feet is in keeping with height limits on the south side of the site, as well as to the west on the opposite corner of Fairfax Drive, a height of 110 feet is permitted at the edge of the Virginia Square sector plan. The existing 75 feet height along Washington Boulevard would be still maintained and is commensurate with existing and planned development at the opposite corner of Washington and Kirkwood. This additional height is mitigated by a more practical approach to the setback guidelines presented on the previous slide. There is a 10 to 20 foot drop in grade at the west end of the church's site. Therefore, the visual impact of the building's height when viewed from the heart of Clarendon will be lessened. And lastly, in the current construction market, it is unlikely that a building would be built to a height of 90 feet, given that less costly wood frame construction can be built by code to a height of 85 feet. Allowing for a height of up to 110 feet provides the option to change to a higher quality type 1 construction. This massing illustration of the proposed redeveloped church property shows the west end of the site built to a height of 90 feet. This next illustration increases the maximum height from 90 feet to 110 feet over a portion of the site, effectively allowing for 2 additional floors. The 110-foot height falls behind the proposed setback line along Washington Boulevard, and a setback above 90 feet would also be provided along Fairfax Drive. These 2 views look west along Washington Boulevard from the east end of the site, with the new church on the left, the purple shading. The left image shows the massing at the west end of the site, shaded brown, with the current permitted 90-foot height and 1 to 3 taper. The right image shows the proposed 110-foot height and revised setback from Washington Boulevard. Even with this relatively long sight line, the proposed additional height and modified setback result in very little visibility of the upper stories from the street. Moving to the opposite end of the block, this pair of views look east along Washington Boulevard, just west of the Kirkwood Road intersection, and compare the existing heights and taper requirements shown on the left to the proposed height and modified setback of the upper floors on the right. As can be seen in the right image, only a very small portion of the upper floors are visible, and these will be completely hidden by the lower building once the viewer crosses the Kirkwood Road intersection. The sector plan currently requires buildings along Fairfax Drive to set back above a height of 60 feet. This setback does not appear to be responding to a corresponding setback requirement or building height limit on the immediate adjacent blocks. Specifically, on the opposite side of Fairfax Drive, a building can extend to a height of 90 feet with no setback. We believe it is consistent and reasonable to allow buildings on this portion of the church property to similarly extend up to a height of 90 feet before setting back, matching the allowed height on the south side of Fairfax Drive. This sketch view taken from Kirkwood and Fairfax Drive looking east provides an illustration of a 90-foot height extending all the way out to Fairfax Drive. We are also depicting landscape improvements to Fairfax Drive and showing green space on the triangular site on the opposite block in lieu of a building, something that the county is considering. We would not recommend a building setback at the 60-foot height, as this will result in an awkward building proportion made all the more evident by the long sight lines afforded by the extra width of Fairfax Drive. A good pedestrian experience along this part of the site will be best achieved with a building design that vertically expresses a distinct base, middle, and top, has bay elements that create ins and outs along its length, and that provide hierarchy and visual interest. And most importantly, has a well-detailed and articulated first floor where the building most directly comes in contact with the public. In closing, the conceptual sketch shown here is of the new St. Charles Borromeo with its front door facing the heart of Clarendon, the parish center beyond, and transitioning to the development partner's new project anchoring the western portion of the site. Thank you for your time.